All right, how's everybody doing today? Today we are going to read Chapter 8 of 1984 by George Orwell. This will not be a typical audiobook reading because we will stop to look at pictures of words that maybe you probably don't understand or you're not familiar with. We will talk about interesting phrases or vocabulary if I think that you don't know what they are. And if you are watching this live with me, then I encourage you to ask questions as we go. So I will be looking at the comments, and if you have a question about a word or a phrase that you see, please go ahead and just write in the comments your question. And if I see it, I will be happy to answer it. All right, it's been a while since I read Chapter 7. I think it's been like a month, so I don't remember what happened in Chapter 7. Usually I like to start by talking about what happened in the previous chapter. But I forgot. So let's just start with Chapter 8 of 1984 by George Orwell. For perhaps 2 seconds, he was back in his half-forgotten world of his childhood. Then the door banged. And you know, a bang is a sound of two things hitting each other, so somebody is knocking on the door very hard, seeming to cut off the smell as abruptly as though it had been a sound. I'm not sure about that. Oh, the smell had been a sound. Okay. Well, you know, cut off is a phrasal verb, which means to interrupt. So he's smelling something. Did I? Oh no. I'm sorry, I missed a few sentences. I went too far up. Okay, let's start over. From somewhere at the bottom of the passage, the smell of roasting coffee, real coffee, not victory coffee, came floating out into the street. Winston paused involuntarily. For perhaps 2 seconds, he was back in the half-forgotten world of his childhood. So everything now in this period is horrible. You know, the gin is horrible, the cigarettes are horrible, and they have this fake victory coffee. I think maybe he's going to visit this forbidden cafe. I think that was what was happening in the last paragraph, the last chapter. And so he's standing outside the cafe, this forbidden cafe, a cafe where political rebels go. Dissidents, that's what you call them. People who disagree with the government and are almost considered criminals are usually called dissidents. So this is like an underground cafe. And I think he went, I don't remember what happened in Chapter 7, but I think he was approaching it, or he was thinking about the cafe in Chapter 7. Now it seems like he's outside and he can smell real coffee. But the door banged. That means it made a big noise. And it cut off that smell. So at first, he's smelling the coffee. But then, boom, the door makes a big sound. And it's almost like it says that sound cut off the smell. So it interrupted the smell. Like the smell disappeared because of the bang. Okay. Then the door banged, seeming to cut off the smell as abruptly as though it had been a sound. And abrupt means very quickly, very fast. Actually, abrupt is a pretty good vocabulary word. I think we should add that to the list. Later, I'll be making some videos to practice some of the vocabulary that we... Whoops, that's not it. Wait a minute, let me get back to Chapter 8 here. What happened? Okay, there we go. Wait a minute. So how... Sorry. Every time I do this, I get lost. One of these days I'll remember how I did everything. Okay. I don't know why I have this here. Just a second. I just want to put the word abrupt here, which means quick. Okay. So we've got number 1, abrupt. That's a pretty common word. You may not be familiar with it because it's not the most commonly taught word in an English class, but it's pretty common in speech or in situations. Abrupt means quick or fast. Okay. Let's go to the next paragraph. He had walked several kilometers over pavements, and his varicose ulcer was throbbing. Throbbing is it's this kind of movement, boom, 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 like a heartbeat. But if you have something that's in pain, like maybe if you hit your thumb, then that pain you feel, your thumb will go boom, 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 and it will hurt. That's a throbbing pain. You could have a throbbing headache. Throbbing is that boom, 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 boom feeling. Okay, so he had walked several kilometers over pavements, and his varicose ulcer was throbbing. This was the second time. Actually, I want to put the word throbbing up here. That's a good word. Throbbing. So we'll just put it up here as a reminder that later I'm going to make a vocabulary video about this word. Okay. So his varicose ulcer was throbbing. This was the second time in 3 weeks that he had missed an evening at the community center. A rash act. Now, to me, rash could mean several things. Rash is a noun. We won't talk about that here because they're using it like an adjective here. And to me, rash means like desperate. But I'm just going to check the meaning here. Well, the definition that I get from Google is displaying or proceeding from a lack of careful consideration of the possible consequences of an action. To me, that means desperate. So I think that would have been a much clearer way of explaining that word. Let's see. Let's put that up here. That's a good word too. Rash. And then a note here that it means desperate, because rash as a noun means something else. So we'll say rash, desperate. This is hard to read on the screen. Okay, but you can see rash is kind of like desperate. You act out of emotion because you don't know what to do. That's rash. Okay. So this was the second time in 3 weeks that he had missed an evening at the community center. A rash act, since you could be certain that a number of your attendances at the center was carefully checked. So this is the third time that he was supposed to attend an activity at the community center. And they're calling it a rash act. Wait, let me check Google's definition of rash again. Displaying or proceeding from lack. Okay, well, I think that this use of the word rash is more like the Google definition than my definition. So it was something that he wasn't being careful about it, because they watch you and they know if you're attending. So if you're not attending the community center, they're saying, "Where is Winston? Why is he not at the community center with us?" And this makes suspicion. And this is 3 times he's done this. So let's see. Since you could be certain that the number of your attendances at the community center was carefully checked. In principle, a party member had no spare time. Spare time means free time, leisure time, time to relax, time to do what you want. And was never alone except in bed. So they're saying a party member never had any free time and would never be alone except when sleeping. It was assumed that when he was not working, eating, or sleeping, he would be taking part in some kind of communal recreation. Recreation is a word that means like relaxing or doing hobbies or something like that. So a recreational act would be like playing a game or painting or creating something relaxing and fun. Well, it's supposed to be fun. That's what recreation means. Enjoying yourself is what recreation means. I don't think that these activities were probably enjoyable though, because they're mandatory. You have to do it. To do anything that suggested a taste for solitude. So, solitude means being alone, and having a taste for solitude is really a fancy way of saying preferring to be alone. So, if you did anything that made it appear that you prefer to be alone, let's see what happens. Even for a walk by yourself was always slightly dangerous. So it was dangerous to make it look like you enjoyed being alone. There was a word for it in Newspeak, own life. It was called own life, it was called, meaning individualism and eccentricity. But this evening, as he came out of the ministry, the balminess of the April air had tempted him. Now, balmy, that's a pretty interesting word. Actually, I think I'm going to put that on my list. It's not a terribly important word. You don't really need it in everyday speech. But it could be helpful in situations where balmy, you're trying to communicate an idea. Balmy is like a combination of humid and hot. So the air is very wet, that's humid, and the air is very hot, and that's what balmy is. I don't have faith in my definitions. I just want to check the definition here. Balmy. Balmy weather, summer evening, lacking reason or mental sound fluid. Well, this says mild or temperate. That's not how I think of balmy. What is balmy weather? Balmy weather is fairly warm and pleasant. That's funny. I never really thought of it like that. Every time I've heard somebody say it's balmy, it's always been about being hot and humid. Huh. Well, I guess I've been wrong my whole life. Okay. Well, let's see. So that's why I check, because sometimes I don't get it right. Okay. So, own life. It was called, meaning individualism and eccentricity. Now, being eccentric means being different or strange. So, they think that if you prefer to be alone most of the time or sometimes, that is eccentric behavior. That is strange behavior, unusual behavior. But this evening, as he came out of the ministry, the balminess of the April air had tempted him. So, the pleasant, warm, nice evening had tempted him. He wanted to go for a walk. He wanted to do something because the weather was so nice. The sky was a warmer blue than he had seen it that year. And suddenly, the long, noisy evening at the center, the boring, exhausting games, the lectures, the creaking camaraderie oiled by gin, had seemed intolerable. Okay, so wait, let's go back over that. The sky was a warmer blue. So the sky looked nicer than he had seen it that year. And suddenly the long, noisy evening at the center. The boring, exhausting games. Exhausting means make you feel tired. The lectures, the creaking camaraderie. So camaraderie is like friendship. But creaking is really a sound. It's like, so like maybe if you open an old door, it makes like a creaking noise because it needs oil. Or if you walk on old floors, Have you ever walked on the wood floors of an old building? You can hear that's a creaking noise, or up the creaking stairs. It's a noise. So when you hear the word creaking, you think like old and in bad condition. But let me just check what Google says. I don't trust myself today with definitions. Creaking, making a harsh, high-pitched sound when being moved or when pressure is weighted or applied, showing weakness or frailty under strain. Yeah, so it's really about that noise, that noise, like opening a door. That's a creaking door. So when you hear that word creaking, you always think of old things that are in bad condition. So the creaking camaraderie is kind of an interesting phrase, but I think he's trying to convey, I guess, is that it feels so old. The word I want to use is stale, but you probably don't know that word stale. Like it's no good anymore. It's been used up. It's old. And he says, oh, the creaking camaraderie oiled. See, things that creak need oil so that they don't make noise anymore. Oiled by gin. But the oil here is gin. It's not oil. Okay. Had seemed intolerable. And intolerable means I don't like it. I can't stand it. I'm sorry, I have to recenter the page so I can read everything. I wish I had a quiet mouse. I know this must be annoying. The creaking of my mouse. Wait a minute, we have the word pulse. On impulse. He had turned off into the labyrinth of London. A labyrinth is like a maze. Let me show you a picture of a labyrinth. It's not a terribly important word, but let's see if we can find a good picture here. So this is like a labyrinth. You know, you walk in here, you get confused and lost. That's a labyrinth. It's like a maze. Now in the book it says he wandered off into the labyrinth of London. So you can imagine then the streets are very small and confusing, and you can get lost very easily in the streets. First south and then east, then north again, losing himself among unknown streets and hardly bothering in which direction he was going. So he just started walking. He wasn't really, he had no place in mind to go. If there is hope, he had written in his diary, it lies in the proles. Now remember, the proles are the common people. And they're not party members. I guess they're seen more like animals than anything else. But in his diary, he wrote, if there is hope, he had written in his diary, it lies in the proles. The proles will save the world. The words kept coming back to him. Statement of a mystical truth and a palpable absurdity. Palpable, that's kind of an interesting word. Palpable means that you can, I think it means you can taste it. Or you can touch it. Let's see, palpable. Capable of being perceived, yeah. So it's something obvious, something that you can see. You don't really need evidence for it. Let's put palpable on our list of vocabulary words. That's kind of a cool word we can practice later. Palpable. So we've got the word palpable here. So when you say something is palpable, you're saying, "Oh, I don't have to prove it to you. It's obvious. You can see it. You can touch it. It's there. It doesn't need me to explain it to you. It's something you can touch, something you can sense with your eyes or your nose or your mouth." All right. What did he say? Palpable absurdity. Absurd means ridiculous. So, thinking about the proles saving the world, these animals, these common people saving the world, was palpably absurd. It was like obviously absurd. It didn't require any explanation. People would just laugh at that. That's so absurd. This idea that the proles could. Absurd means like stupid or ridiculous. He was somewhere in the vague brown colored slums to the north and east of what had once been St. Pancras Station. He was walking up a cobbled street of little two-story houses with battered doors, which gave straight on the pavement and which were somehow curiously suggestive of rat holes. There were puddles of filthy water here and there among the cobbles. The cobbles are like stones for streets. So any old city used to have like stones in the road, and that was the street, and those are called cobbles. That's what he keeps referring to here. In and out of the dark doorways and down narrow alleyways, that branched off in either direction. Branch off means a phrasal verb. It means going in different directions, like the branches of a tree. People swarmed in astonishing numbers. Do I have my swarm video? We've already used the word swarm, and then I made a... Do I have it here? Because if I can find... I'm very proud of my swarm video. Oh, here it is. Which nobody ever watches on YouTube. I got some people to watch it on TikTok. It got some attention on TikTok. But for some reason not on YouTube. I don't think I posted it on Rumble. Let's see. Yeah, I'm going to make you watch my swarm video because we've already talked about this word in a different chapter. And let's see if I can position this. Can I make it smaller? Here we go. The word swarm is used to describe a group of insects. It's like a cloud of insects. Obviously, this is not a good thing. You can use swarm to talk about large groups of people in a negative way. It can be used as a noun, a swarm of people, or a verb. Let's practice using it as a verb. Here is a situation. A large group of people ran to the entrance at one time. Let's use swarm. The people swarmed the entrance like insects. Let's make a when question. When did the people swarm? When did the people swarm the entrance? Here is the answer. When the subway doors opened. The people swarmed the entrance when the subway doors opened. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, I'm very proud of that. I like that video. It hasn't gotten many views, but I think it's a good video. Okay, sorry for making you watch that, but I just had to. All right, but it's a good video because it really explains what swarm means. And let's see, how did they use it? How did they use it here? Dark doorways, narrow alleyways, branch off. Where's the word swarm? In and out of the dark doorways and down narrow alleyways that branched off on either side, people swarmed. But see, now you know what swarm means because you get that idea of all of the insects. That's what swarm is. It's like a group of flies or bees or mosquitoes. Let's see. So when you talk about people swarming, that's very negative. Well, most people don't like that when there are a lot of people coming up like that. People swarmed in astonishing numbers. Girls in full bloom, with crudely lipsticked mouths. Crude is a bad word. Well, it's not a bad word. It's a very negative word, though. So when he says that they crudely lipsticked their lips, it probably didn't look very nice. It probably looked pretty ugly, actually. And youths who chased the girls, and swollen, waddling women who showed you what the girls would be like in 10 years' time. And old bent creatures, shuffling along on splayed feet, and ragged barefooted children who played in the puddles, and then scattered at angry yells from their mothers. Perhaps a quarter of the windows in the street were broken and boarded up. Most of the people paid no attention to Winston. A few eyed him. When you eye someone, that's like this. So people were, I don't know if that looked, I don't know if that was convincing. But when you eye someone, you're suspicious of them. You're looking at them, usually from the side like this, and you feel uncomfortable about them. That's eyeing someone. So a few eyed him with a sort of guarded curiosity. So they were suspicious and kind of curious, like, what is this guy doing here? Two monstrous women with brick red forearms folded across their aprons were talking outside a doorway. Winston caught scraps of the conversation as he approached. Yes, I says to her. That's all very well, I says. But if you... I forgot what it was here. But if you'd have been in my place... Oh, God. If you'd have been in my place, you'd have done the same as what I done. It's easy to criticize, I says, but you ain't got the same problems as I got. Okay, so they're talking like very, in a very street kind of way. And so he's just hearing a conversation, and one woman is saying, "Yeah, if you were in my position, you would have done the same thing," is what she's saying in typical English. Ah, said the other. That's just it. That's just where it is. The strident voices stopped abruptly. Remember, abruptly means quickly. The women studied him in hostile silence. So hostile means like angry. So the two women are having a conversation about something, and they see Winston, and they immediately stop talking. And they look like they want to hurt him, or they're angry with him. They feel very uncomfortable, very aggressive about him being in their streets. But it was not hostility exactly, merely a kind of wariness. Wariness means tired. So it was more like he was walking past and they were kind of like, oh, like that. Because wary means tired. They're tired of seeing people like that, maybe, in their neighborhood. Or maybe hesitant, like they're a little bit afraid. A momentary stiffening, as at the passing of some unfamiliar animal. So he's saying, imagine if you're having a conversation with a friend, and then a big animal walks past you you've never seen before. How do you react? Well, if you're a little bit afraid, maybe you just stop and you don't move and you don't say anything and you just watch it as it walks past. And that's how Winston felt, or that's how these two women made Winston feel. The blue overalls of the party could not be a common sight in a street like this. So he's dressed in his party uniform. So when the proles see him, that makes them scared. Indeed, it was unwise to be seen in such places unless you had definite business there. The patrols might stop you if you happened to run into them. May I see your papers, comrade? What are you doing here? What time did you leave work? Is this your usual way home? And so on and so forth. Not that there was any rule against walking home by an unusual route, but it was enough to draw attention to you if the thought police heard about it. Suddenly, the whole street was in commotion. There were yells of warning from all sides. People were shooting into doorways like rabbits. So shooting, maybe you know shooting is like bang bang with a gun, but this just means they were running very quickly. So it doesn't mean that they had guns. It just means they were running very quickly, like rabbits, it says. A young woman leapt out of a doorway, a little ahead of Winston, grabbed up a tiny child playing in a puddle, whipped her apron round it, and leapt back again, all in one movement. At the same instant, a man in a concertina-like black suit. What is that? Let me see. I don't know what that means, a concertina suit. Well, I guess it's just like a standard suit. Kind of like, actually it looks kind of like from the 60s. A little bit like from the 60s. Well, that's a nice kind of suit. I didn't know that it was called a concertina suit. Or a concertina style suit. At the same instant, a man in a concertina-like black suit who had emerged from the side alley ran towards Winston, pointing excitedly to the sky. "Steamer," he yelled. "Look out, governor! Bang overhead! Lay down quick!" Steamer was a nickname which, for some reason, the pros applied to rocket bombs. Winston promptly flung himself on his face. The pros were nearly always right when they gave you a warning of this kind. They seemed to possess some kind of instinct which told them several seconds in advance when a rocket was coming. Although the rocket supposedly traveled faster than sound, Winston clasped his forearms above his head. Clasp is like this. This is like clasping. This is what clasp. So actually, it's kind of a useful word. But let me show you an example of a clasp. This is a pretty good picture. These are clasps. So for like jewelry, for like a necklace, or even for a watch, you could use a clasp. That's how you attach things, because this is clasping, like this. So when it says that Winston clasped his forearms over his head, what that means is that he did something like this, because these are your forearms. So something like that. Maybe like this. Maybe that's what he did. Okay, where are we? There was a roar. A roar is like a loud sound, like whoa, something like that. That's a roar that seemed to make the pavement heave. Heave means like come up, become big in one point. So there was a roar, a loud sound, and then it seemed like the floor, the ground, came up a little bit. A shower of light objects pattered onto his back. So he could feel things flying at his back, maybe rocks or something from the street. When he stood up, he found, he was laying on his face. So when he was clasping his hands, it was probably like this. When he stood up, he found that he was covered with fragments of glass from the nearest window. He walked on. It's funny, I was doing a video yesterday, a different kind of video, and we were talking about the phrasal verb go on. So I had that with a student, the phrasal verb go on. And this is a very advanced student. And I said, well, what do you think that means, go on? That's a phrasal verb, go on. And he says, I don't know, which was surprising. Oh, no. We were doing read on. That's what he didn't know. Read on. I said, what do you think that means, read on? And he said, I don't know. I said, well, what does carry on mean? Or keep on? Or go on? What do those mean? Oh, those are all like continue. Yeah, so read on is like continue reading. But here it says he walked on. So what do you think that means? So he was walking down the street and somebody said, look out, there's a bomb. So he went to the ground like this. The bomb exploded. And then he walked on. So what do you think that means? Walk on. Continued walking. So he got up and he continued walking. He walked on. I think maybe I should. Oh, why do I keep doing that? I'm going to put that up as something to practice. Walk on. It's a pretty good one to know. Walk on. That means continue walking. Okay. He walked on. The bomb had demolished a group of houses 200 meters up the street. A black plume of smoke hung in the sky, and below it, a cloud of plaster dust in which a crowd was already forming around the ruins. There was a little pile of plaster lying on the pavement ahead of him, and in the middle of it, he could see a bright red streak. When he got up to it, so that means when he got near it. Again, I think that's kind of an interesting one. Let's put that up here too. So this get up to means getting near to something or getting right next to it. So when you say go up to or get up to the corner, that means arrive at the corner. Kind of means like arrive or get near. There was a pile of plaster lying on the pavement ahead of him, and in the middle of it, he could see a bright red streak. When he got up to it, he saw that it was a human hand, severed at the wrist. Severed means separated, cut off. So he could see like a dead body, but the hand was cut off. It was missing. It was separated. It was severed. Apart from the bloody stump, well, let's take a look at this word stump. The time you would use the word stump the most would be talking about a situation like this. This is a tree stump. But when you talk about like if someone has their hand removed and then you just have this part here. Wait, let's see. I don't know if Google will show this, but let's see if we do hand stump, what happens. Ooh. But this is a stump. This is what you would call a stump, just like the tree stump. not the most important word in the world, but it's good to know, I guess. Mostly for talking about trees, though. Hopefully not for talking about body parts. Apart from the bloody stump, the hand was so completely whitened as to resemble a plaster cast. He kicked the thing into the gutter. Oh my. So the hand was severed from the wrist and he kicked it. Hadi is asking, oh, by the way, hi Hadi, how are you doing today? Hadi is asking, is severed is equal to mangled? No, mangled means the shape has been changed. So wait, let's see what kind of pictures we get if we do mangled. Severed means like cut. But mangled, oh wow. Well, if you Google mangle, you'll see all kinds of horrible pictures. But mangle means like, okay, here, good. We found like a car. I can show you a mangled car. Mangle means like a bad shape. So the original shape of a car is nice and clean, but this is a mangled car. So it's not, there's nothing cut off. It's just the shape has been changed and it's very bad. It's not a nice shape anymore. So you could be mangled from something, but also that's different from severed, which just means separate, remove, and separate. That's sever. I think sever and separate come from the same place. It seems like they should. They probably come from the same word, sever and separate and separate. So he kicked the thing to the gutter. The hand was in the street and he kicked it into the gutter. And then to avoid the crowd, turned down a side street to the right. Within 3 or 4 minutes, he was out of the area which the bomb had affected, and the sordid, swarming life of the street was going on as though nothing had happened. So remember, swarming, that's like bees and insects, how they come together. And now he's saying the sordid, swarming life of the streets. So the people just started moving around again, like insects, like bees or mosquitoes move around. Was going on as though nothing had happened. So now we have go on, which means continue. So life continued, just like nothing happened. It was nearly 20 hours, and the drinking shops, which the proles frequented, pubs they called them, were choked with customers, but their grimy means dirty, their grimy swing doors, endlessly opening and shutting, there came forth the smell of urine, sawdust, and sour beer. In an angle formed by a projecting house front, 3 men were standing very close together, the middle one of them holding a folded up newspaper, which the other 2 were studying over his shoulder. Even before he was near enough to make out the expression, let's see, I want to put that phrasal verb up here, to make out, which could mean several different things. You have to be careful with that phrasal verb. But here what it means is like to distinguish, to see clearly. That's to make out. Okay. Always phrasal verbs mean 2 or 3 or 4 different things. So one very common meaning of to make out means like to distinguish, to see something clearly. So let's go back and see what is it that Winston is making out. What is he seeing clearly? Even before he was near enough to make out the expression on their faces, so even before he was near enough to see clearly if they were happy or sad or in a good mood or in a bad mood, Winston could see absorption in every line of their bodies. It was obviously some serious piece of news that they were reading. So that's kind of complicated, what he's saying here. So let me show you a picture of something. Do you know what this is called? Wait, let me find a good picture. Because some of these aren't very clear what they are. This is a pretty good one. What is this? You probably know what this is, but just in case. This is a sponge. And what does a sponge do? What is the purpose of a sponge? If you have water on the table and you put the sponge, what will happen? What is that action called? Do you know what that action is called? That's absorb. Absorb. I'm not going to use that as a practice word, but I am going to write it up here just so you see. Absorb. And that means like to take in. To take in. So a sponge absorbs water. In school, you absorb information. You absorb education. Hadi says make out means to kiss. Yes, Hadi, that's true. Make out does mean to kiss. It means like very strong kissing. But here, make out means see clearly, to see everything very clearly. So you have to be careful because a lot of times phrasal verbs can mean 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different things. It really depends on the context. So yes, make out sometimes means very extreme kissing, but here it means see something clearly, to distinguish something. Okay, so Nishi Verma says sponge and soaks water, but Nishi, my point is that a sponge absorbs water. It doesn't soak water. You can soak things in water. That means you put something in water and let the water absorb it, or the thing absorbs water like a sponge. So it's almost like the reverse. That's right. Hadi says it absorbs. Hadi, when you say he, she, or it in the present, you have to use an S. He, she, it. You have to say S. So it absorbs water with an S. And how do you think they're using it, though, in the book? Because they're not talking about water here. Let's go back to the book and see. It's pretty complicated, pretty advanced stuff to be talking about this. Winston could see absorption in every line of their bodies. What do you think it means to absorb information? Do you think that means that you're really paying attention? Or do you think that it's very casual, very informal? If you're absorbed in something, what if I say, I was absorbed in the book? What do you think that means? I'll write that out. And since I've got some people talking to me today, I was absorbed in the book. I'll wait for you to reply. What do you think that means? You could be absorbed in a conversation. You could be absorbed in a class. That means like really, not just Nishi Verma says grasping information, but I would say like you're taking it in like a sponge. You're the sponge and the information is coming in. It means you're really interested. It has all of your attention. When you are absorbed in something, absorbed in a conversation, absorbed in a movie, absorbed in a class, it means you're really paying attention. You're giving 100% of your attention to something. So in the book, it says Winston could see they were absorbed because the three men were reading a newspaper. And before, even when he was very far away, before he could see what their faces were saying, he could see that they were very interested in the information in the newspaper. They were absorbed in the newspaper. Winston could see the absorption. Okay, well, that's a pretty interesting word. Okay, let's see. So Winston could see absorption in every line of their bodies. It was obviously some serious piece of news that they were reading. He was a few paces away when suddenly the group broke up. That means they separated. They went different ways. And two of the men were in violent altercation. An altercation means a fight. Hadi says you are engrossed in a book. Yes, that's a very fancy word, Hadi. That's a very good one. And if you're taking a TOEFL test or an IELTS test, that's a good word to know. But you could also use absorb the same way that you use engrossed. It means you're very interested. It has all of your attention, and I think they're kind of equal levels of English. So let's see. So he was a few paces away from them when suddenly the group broke up. They separated. And two of the men were in a violent altercation. An altercation is a fight. So they were having a violent fight. For a moment, they seemed almost on the point of blows. Okay, so blows means hits. So they weren't actually hitting each other. Maybe they were arguing very violently. Because it says they were almost on the point of hitting. They weren't hitting each other, but they were very close to hitting each other's. Blow is like hit. Can't you bleeding well listen to what I say? I tell you, no number ending in 7 ain't won for over 14 months. So I think they're talking about gambling. Okay, let's see. Yes. Yes, it has then. No, it hasn't. Back home, I got the old lot of 'em for over 2 years, wrote down on a piece of paper. Oh, this language. I take 'em down regular as the clock. And I tell you, no number in 7. So it sounds like they're betting, they're gambling on I don't know what yet. Maybe they'll say maybe horses or something. But they're saying no number. No, whatever this is, ending in the number 7 has ever won. And the other person is disagreeing and says, yes, yes, they have. And the other person says, no, because at home for 2 years, I have been keeping a record of every time they win, and nothing ending in the number 7 wins. I don't know what they're talking about. Maybe horses. Let's see. Yes. A 7 as 1. I could pretty near tell you the bleeding number. 407. So that's 407. 407 it ended in. It were in February, 2nd week in February. The way that they're talking is like London street language. It's very funny. February, your grandmother. I got it all down in black and white, and I tell you no number. Oh, pack it in, said the third man. So the third man is telling them to stop it. Hadi says, oh wait, what's it as? Okay, in some forms of English, especially in the UK, it's very well. Let's go now that you're asking that. Let's go back over the conversation. Because in some types of English, especially in the UK, and this is usually it's not very attractive English. It's usually like street English. People do not pronounce H's in the front of words. So let's now that you ask that, let's go back over the conversation and try to understand what it says. Can't you bleeding well listen to what I say? So can't you listen? And again, maybe in more typical English in the UK, they would say, can't you bloody listen? But here he's saying, can't you bleeding well listen? It's the same thing. I tell you, no number in 7 ending in 7 ain't won for over 14 months. So he's saying no number ending in 7 has won in over 14 months. And then the person says, yes, it has, which is yes, it has. Yes, it has. And then the person says, no, it is not, which in more standard English is no, it has not. And then he says, back home, I got the old lot of them. So that's I've got the whole lot of them. So I've whole, WHOLE, means entire, all of it, all of them. So that is them. I got the old lot of them means I've got all of them. Or this is not standard English. This is like London street English. So, or maybe some other places in the UK too, but it's very not standard at all. And not very nice. It's not very nice English. It's not very attractive to talk like that. For over 2 years, wrote down on a piece of paper. So he says, I have all of them for over 2 years back home, at my home. I have a list. I have all of them written down for over 2 years on a piece of paper. I take some down. So take down can mean write down. So that's a common thing. Like when you say take something down, that can mean write something down. Take it down, that means write it down. Or it could mean write it down in a particular context. So he says, I take some down. I write them down. I write the numbers down. Regular as the clock. So very, very regular. I never miss. I always do it just like a clock. And I tell you, no number ending in 7. Yes, a 7 as 1. That's yes, a 7 has 1. I could pretty near tell you the bleeding number. 407. No, I don't know if you know this, but a lot of times when we are saying words in the hundreds, 100, 200, 300, 800, when you have a 0, so for example, 807, very frequently we say O instead of 0. So if you said, wait, let me write it down. I'm going to put this here. If you told me to read this number, maybe I would say 807. Okay, but maybe I would say 807. That's very normal. That's very typical. That when you have a 0 and a number, you don't say 0. You say O. 807. And that's what he's doing here. Yes, a 7 as 1. I could pretty near tell you the bleeding number. 407. So that's 407. 407. 407. 407 it ended in. It were in February. Second week in February. February, your grandmother. So that's like, I don't know how to so sometimes if somebody says something to you and you don't believe it and you're angry at them for saying such a lie, you might repeat what they say plus something. So for example, you could say February my butt. Like it happened in February. February my butt. Butt is like your backside here. It's not a bad word to say butt. There are worse words that you could say. But here, I've never heard anybody say this, but this is February your grandmother, which means I don't believe you. It's not February. You're full of it. I got it all down in black and white, and I tell you, no number. Oh, pack it in, said the third man. Yeah, Nishi Verma says February my foot. Actually, that's a good one. I'm ashamed I didn't think of something nicer to say, like my foot. You're right. You could say February my foot. That's exactly right. But here, I've never seen anybody say, use like parents or grandparents, but I guess it's kind of funny sounding. Okay, let's see. They were talking about the lottery. Okay, so they weren't talking about horses. They were talking about lottery numbers. Winston looked back when he had gone 30 meters, and they were all arguing with vivid, passionate faces. The lottery, with its weekly payout of enormous prizes, was the one public event to which the proles paid serious attention. It was probable that there were some millions of proles for whom the lottery was the principal, if not the only reason, for remaining alive. So the proles took the lottery very seriously. That was a very important thing for them. You could see how they were arguing over the lottery numbers. And according to the book, that was like the only hope in their lives. Their only reason for living was the lottery because it paid very big prizes. Maybe it rescued them from a horrible life. Nishi Verma is saying, what is proles? Well, in this book, 1984, which is a very influential book in English, by the way. Sorry, I have to clear my throat. There are certain levels of society. So you have the party members, the members of this political party that run the entire country. And then you have a group of common people. And they have no association with the party. They don't even follow party rules. Nobody cares about them. They're just like common people in the street. And the party has all kinds of rules that you have to follow and all kinds of activities that you have to do. But these common people, these proles, and I think it comes from the word proletariat, which means like the common people, the working people. The proles don't follow those rules. They don't have any rules. They can do whatever they want. Nobody cares about them. So they do whatever they want. So that's why they're in the street fighting with each other. Okay, it was probable that there were some millions of prole. By the way, people use prole as an insult in common language, but it kind of has the idea of like a low-paying job or somebody who doesn't think for themselves. The proles, the people in the party kind of view the proles like animals. That's why they don't care about them. Let's see. It was probable that there were some millions of proles for whom the lottery was the principal, if not the only reason for remaining alive. It was their delight, their folly, their anodyne. Hadi says, is there any difference between a raffle and a lottery? Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to... to me, when you say raffle, it sounds like a much smaller operation. Like not so many people participate in it. But I don't know if there's a difference because to me they seem like the same thing. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Let me see. Difference between... Well, there's a legal difference. But it depends on who is making the rules. So a raffle, participants buy tickets for a chance to win a prize, often with the proceeds going to a charitable event. In a lottery, tickets are sold, but the proceeds may go to the government or a specific fund. Frequency, lotteries tend to be... Okay, I think really the big difference, besides I think raffles usually being smaller, is that lottery is like a regular event, but a raffle is usually something special. And usually the reason a raffle happens is to help somebody or some group or some area. So maybe there's like an emergency. Maybe there was an earthquake. So very quickly they say, okay, we're going to do a raffle to make money to help these people. So that's usually, the raffle usually has a purpose. Proletariat is used in a Russian Revolution. Yeah, it's a socialist, communist type of word. I don't know the exact definition, but I think it's like it's used to refer to the working class, the working people, the people who work. And that's where I think that's where the word prole comes from in the book, because these are the common people, the working people in the story. Okay, let's see. Oh, I've seen this word anodyne. I don't like this word anodyne, but I've seen people use it, and I don't like the sound of it, but I forgot what it means. So I just wanted to find that just for myself. Uh, describes something that is inoffensive or bland or unremarkable. So something boring. Let's see, how are they using it here? Uh, it was their delight, their folly, their anodyne, their intellectual stimulant. Oh, anodyne can also mean something that reduces pain. So I guess here it means like reducing pain. That's why I don't like the word anodyne. It sounds like a medical term. So, and it has medical application. Where the lottery was concerned, even people who could barely read and write seemed capable of intricate calculations and staggering feats of memory. So even people who couldn't really read or write knew about the lottery numbers. They remembered the different kinds of numbers, how much people won, what kind of numbers win. And it was pretty amazing that they could remember all of this. I'm sorry, I just have to take a 1-minute break. I will be back in just a minute. Let me switch over to my be right back screen. Okay, we are back. Okay. Nishi is asking, is this a regular class? Well, I try to do it regularly. sometimes, sometimes I skip. I don't have a special time. It's just when I have time. I like to. I'm actually going to read. I'm reading two books. I'm doing David Copperfield, so I'll probably be reading a chapter from David Copperfield later today. So I don't know how much time is left with this chapter. Then I'll probably take like an hour break, and then I will come back and read a chapter from David Copperfield in the same way. Is there Hadi is asking, is there any difference between proletariat and bourgeois? uh, See, you're asking about political theory, and I'm not very familiar with that political theory, but what I understand is that the proletariat is at the bottom. These are the workers, the people who do manual labor, and the bourgeoisie are people with not super rich, I don't think, but kind of like middle class people. And bourgeois is usually used as an insult in modern English. And younger people have been using the term bougie. I think recently, like the past 10 years or so, bougie. I don't know how you spell that. Let's take a look at that. But that comes from the word bourgeois. But it kind of means like boring, middle class, fancy, but in a bad way, like showing off money. Let's see. How do you spell? I don't know how you spell bougie. Let's see. Bougie. A thin. Wait. Let me see. Bougie. Luxurious lifestyle. Humble in character. Well, they say it's a hip hop word, and the way they spell it is like this. But it comes from bourgeois. I'm sure of that. Wait a minute. Let me. So this is a word that you will see people using in no, I don't use it. I think younger people use it. I'm old. I don't use this word. But so according to Google, bougie means like luxurious, yeah, humble in character. That's oh wait. Let me wait. Is it spelled? No, the correct spelling. See, I thought it was spelled like this. I'm just going by what Google gives me, but this is not the right spelling. The way you should spell it is more like the word bourgeois. So it's like this. Bougie. French term refers to middle class, upper class. Yeah, it just means like expensive, but it has like a negative. To me, it has like a negative meaning, like people showing off or people buying unnecessary things because they have too much money, which is what I think in that ideology. The bourgeoisie are the people with a lot of money that they don't need. Let's see. Now, you've got me curious. I'm going to have to check the definition of bourgeois. Middle class, typically materialistic, conventional attitudes. Yeah. All right. But in modern English, people use this term bougie. Younger people, anyway. Okay, let's see. Nishi Verma is saying, do you save these live videos? Yes, Nishi. Please go and look at my previous videos. So far, we've done 7 chapters, and they are on my channel. So if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. And also, definitely go and find the live classes. I'm doing David Copperfield and 1984, and I do all kinds of different live classes. Let's see. Hadi says altercation can be replaced with bandy or bickering. Well, I think when you're bickering, that's just with, and also bandy, but I have to check. Bandy to me is not a very common word, but let me just check how they say bandy. To me, bandy is just like talking. Yeah. When I ask Google to define bandy, it says discuss or mention something in a casual or informal way. Just means to bandy about, means like talking about nothing. But bickering means like arguing with words, having a fight with words. But altercation, I don't know if you remember this. When I first read that there was an altercation, I thought they were hitting each other. Because usually when you use the word altercation, it sounds like it's physical. But if you say bickering, that just means fighting. Fighting with words, arguing with words. No physical problems. Altercation, on the other hand, to me, sounds like physical fighting. Okay, let's see. Let's go back. So there was a whole tribe of men who made a living simply by selling systems, forecasts, and lucky amulets. In case you don't know what an amulet is, it's like a good luck charm. Let me show you. Let's see. What kind of pictures do we get with amulet? Something you might wear for good luck. So these are amulets of a certain type. Amulets. So people made businesses out of selling amulets so that you could win the lottery. The proles took the lottery very seriously. Nishi Verma is saying altercation is verbal arguments. To me, I think it's like physical. Let me check. I'll ask Google. Altercation meaning. Noisy, heated, angry dispute. Got into several altercations. Yeah, I guess maybe it is just words. But I don't know, for some reason to me when I hear that, I think because the police use that word a lot. And like if you ever watch these TV shows where what are they called? Like the reality shows where the police go, the camera follows the police as they're working. They use the word altercation a lot. So I guess I just associate that word with physical violence. But when I read the definition, I guess it doesn't have to be, because it says a noisy, heated, angry dispute. So those sound like words to me. But I don't know. When I hear that word, I always think of physical activity. I guess I'm wrong. Okay, let's see. There was a whole tribe of men who made a living simply by selling systems, forecasts, and lucky amulets. Winston had nothing to do with the running of the lottery. You know, that's a good phrasal verb. I don't even know what number we're on anymore. Have nothing to do with it. To have nothing to do with it means to not participate in it in any way. So if it says Winston had nothing to do with the lottery, that means he never participated in any way in the lottery. Winston had nothing to do with the running of the lottery, which was this just means he didn't work on it. Not that he didn't participate, but that it wasn't part of his job in any way. Which was managed by the Ministry of Plenty. But he was aware, indeed, everyone in the party was aware, that the prizes were largely imaginary. Oh, so these prizes that the proles supposedly win, they were imaginary. They didn't get paid. They didn't win anything. Only small sums were actually paid out, the winners of the big prizes being non-existent persons. So when there was a really big prize, they would pick a winner who didn't exist, so they didn't have to pay them. In the absence of any real intercommunication between one part of Oceania and another, this was not difficult to arrange. But if there was hope, it lay in the proles. You had to cling on to that. Hadi is asking, is amulet like a talisman? I think so. I don't know if there's a difference. Let's see, I've got ChatGPT open. Let me ask. To me, there's no difference. That doesn't mean it's not. Let's see. If there is a difference, it's a small difference. Let's just say they're almost the same. I mean, I guess there are some differences, but it's not big. Okay, let's see. But if there was hope, it lay in the prose. You had to cling on to that. When you put it into words, it sounded reasonable. It was when you looked at the human beings passing you on the pavement that it became an act of faith. The street into which he had turned ran downhill. He had a feeling that he had been in this neighborhood before, and there was a main thoroughfare not far away. From somewhere ahead there came a din of shouting voices. The street took a sharp turn and then ended in a flight of steps, which led down onto a sunken alley where a few stall keepers were selling tired-looking vegetables. At this moment, Winston remembered where he was. The alley led out into the main street. Down the next turning, not 5 minutes away, was the junk shop, where he had bought the blank book which was now his diary. And in a small stationer's shop, not far away, he bought his pen holder and his bottle of ink. He paused for a moment at the top of the steps on the opposite side of the alley. There was a dingy little pub. Dingy is kind of like the opposite of new looking. So if it's dingy, it looks old and maybe a little dirty and not very well maintained. Nishi Verma is asking, what is a thoroughfare? A thoroughfare is kind of like a large road or an area where you can pass. I've never really thought about the meaning of that word. Let's see. Like a main road. I would say it's like a main road. Let's see. A road or path forming a route between two places. Yeah, it's like a road. It's another way. It's a fancy, complicated way of saying a road. I think it's usually used for main roads, principal roads. How did they use it here? They said, did they make it sound big? Yeah, well, he says main thoroughfare, but that's usually how you use it. You say like main, that means like main road. He paused for a moment at the top of the steps on the opposite side of the alley. There was a dingy little pub. So dingy, it's kind of like the opposite of new. It means like not old looking or not fresh, maybe a little dirty, a little not very well taken care of, something like that. Whose windows appeared to be frosted over, but in reality were merely coated with dust. So it looked like there was ice on the windows, like it was winter, but really it's just that the windows were very dirty. A very old man, bent but active, with white mustache that bristled. I lost my place. That bristled forward like those of a prawn, pushed open the swing door and went in. As Winston stood watching, it occurred to him that the old man, who must be 80 at least, had already been middle-aged when the revolution happened. He and a few others, like him, were the last links of what now existed in the vanished world of capitalism. In the party itself, there were not many people left whose ideas had been formed before the revolution. The older generation had mostly, every time I scroll, I lose my place. The older generation had mostly been wiped out. Oh, to be wiped out. Let's put that up here. Wipe out. That's a phrasal verb. And here, what it means is like erase or disappear. To wipe out. If something is wiped out, it has disappeared. It's gone. It is erased. The older generation had mostly wiped out in the Great Purges, had been mostly wiped out in the Great Purges of the 50s and 60s. So most of the people who could remember the time before the revolution were erased, eliminated, disappeared in the 50s or 60s. So I guess it was unusual to see such an old person, an 80-year-old man at that time. So this was somebody who could remember life before. Hadi says main artery. You could say main artery. I think thoroughfare, I don't know, thoroughfare sounds better if you ask me. But you could say main artery if you want. That pretty much means the same thing. In the party itself, there were not many people left whose ideas had been formed before the revolution. The older generation had been wiped out in the Great Purges. A purge is a time, a purge is when you make something go away. When you make something, usually if you know vomiting, that's called purging. That means something is leaving you. So when you purge something, you're making something go away. You're eliminating something. So the Great Purges of the 50s and 60s, that means in the 1950s and 60s, they killed a lot of people to get rid of them. The few who survived had long ago been terrified into complete intellectual surrender. If there was anyone still alive who could give you a truthful account of conditions in the early part of the century, it could only be a prole. So all of the party members either were killed, all of the party members who could remember before the revolution were either killed in the 50s or 60s, or they were so afraid to talk about the difference between life then and life now that the only way that you could really get information about the past was from a prole. Because they didn't care about proles. They didn't bother with proles. The proles just did whatever they wanted. They thought of proles like animals. Dingy place has miasma. Miasma? I'm not sure what you mean by that. I'm looking up that word. I know I've seen a word like miasma before, but highly unpleasant, unhealthy smell or vapor. If something is dingy, I think it does have a bad smell because I can see the next page here, and I noticed some references to bad smells. But I think just because something, if you're talking about something being dingy, you're talking about the way that it looks, not the way that it smells. If I just Google the word dingy, let me show you the kind of pictures that I get. And like I said, it's kind of like the opposite of new. I had to put dingy place because if I put D-I-N-G-Y, that's a noun and it means something different. That's a dinghy. But look, this is like, these are dingy buildings. They're kind of dirty and old. That's usually what you think about when you think of something being dingy. Let me see if I can find anything else that's kind of interesting. Here's another example of dingy. That's really dingy. I wonder where that is. I guess it's art. So thank goodness this place doesn't really exist. is not very nice. But dingy doesn't look very nice. It looks old. It looks like people aren't taking care of it. Ugly. Something like that. Dingy. But it isn't about smells. Okay, let's see. Suddenly, the passage from the history book that he had copied into his diary came back into Winston's mind, and a lunatic impulse took hold of him. He would go into the pub. He would scrape acquaintance with the old man and question him. I've never really seen those two words together, scrape acquaintance. But I guess what that means is that he wants to try to be, well, it says that, what did it say here? He would scrape acquaintance with him and question, like make friends with him. He would try to make friends with him, I think is what that means. I've never seen that before, scrape acquaintance. And question him. He would say to him, "Tell me about your life when you were a boy. What was it like in those days? Were things better than they are now, or were they worse?" Hurriedly, lest he should have time to become frightened, he descended the steps and crossed the narrow street. It was madness, of course, as usual. There was no definite rule against talking to proles and frequenting their pubs, but it was far too unusual an action to pass unnoticed. So Winston is taking a very big risk going into this pub where the proles go and trying to talk to them. There's no rule against it, but being seen there with these people would cause great suspicion, and it was a very dangerous thing that he was doing. If the patrols appeared, he might plead an attack of faintness. So he's saying if the police come and ask him, "What are you doing here?" he would say, "Oh, I didn't feel very well, and I just came in here to get a drink." Nishi Verma says, "Can you explain the word lest?" Lest is an advanced English vocabulary word, and it's a word that you use as a signal to talk about something that you're afraid of, like the consequence that you're afraid of. So if it's raining outside, I could say, "Nishi, if you're going outside, take an umbrella lest you get wet." So you say lest, and then you name the thing you are afraid of, the thing you don't want to happen, lest you get wet. If you're going on a long bus trip, I could say, "Nishi, that's a very long bus trip. You should take some food lest you get hungry. I'm afraid you're going to get hungry if you don't take some food with you." So you see, you put lest in front of something as a signal to mean, I don't want this thing to happen. So let's go back and read. I have some videos practicing lest, some exercise videos where you can find that vocabulary word and practice how to use it. But let's, on my channel, Professor English ESL class, don't forget to subscribe. And don't forget to press the like button. Let's see, how did they use it here? Oh, it's right. Hurriedly, lest he should have time to become frightened. So Winston is thinking about this thing. I'm going to go into that pub and I'm going to talk to that old man. So he did it really quickly because he was afraid if he went slowly, by the time he got to the door, he would say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's too risky, too stupid. Does that make sense? That's the thing. So he ran to the door because he knew that he only would have the courage for a minute. It was madness, of course, as usual. There was no definite rule against talking to proles and frequenting their pubs, but it was far too unusual an action to pass unnoticed. Uh, Islam says, I need teacher. Well, Islam, subscribe to my channel and take a look at my videos and keep watching right now because we're learning new vocabulary words. If the patrols appeared, he might plead an attack of faintness. But it was not likely that they would believe him. So if the police come and say, "What are you doing here?" he would say, "Oh, I felt sick. I needed to get something to drink." But probably the police would not believe that. He pushed open the door, and the hideous, cheesy smell of sour beer. Hideous means horrible, disgusting. The hideous, cheesy smell of sour beer hit him in the face. So he opened the door and, ugh, it smells disgusting in here. As he entered, the din of voices dropped to about half the volume. Behind his back, he could feel everyone eyeing his blue overalls. Remember, eyeing is kind of when you look to the side like this, or you watch something to see what's going to happen. You're suspicious. When you're eyeing something, you're very suspicious. What are you doing? So let's see here. When did they use eyeing? Did I already miss it? Wait. As he entered, let's see, behind his back, he could feel everyone eyeing his blue overalls. So behind him, he could feel people looking at him. He could feel it. A game of darts, which was going on at the other end of the room, interrupted itself for perhaps as much as 30 seconds. The old man, whom he had followed, was standing at the bar, having some kind of altercation, so we know it's a very big argument, with the barman, a large, stout, hook-nosed young man with an enormous forearms. Stout kind of means like fat or muscular. It's like fat muscles. A large, stout, hook-nosed young man with enormous forearms. Oh, forearms. A knot of others standing round with glasses in their hands were watching the scene. Okay, here we go. We've got some more London street talk. Where'd it go? I asked you civil enough, didn't I? So that's, I asked you politely, didn't I? Said the old man, straightening his shoulders pugnaciously. You telling me you ain't got a pint mug in the old bleeding boozer? Okay, so the old man is saying, you're telling me you don't have a pint of a pint mug? So I don't understand the conversation here. I don't know if they're refusing to sell him alcohol. Maybe he's already drunk, or maybe they just don't have any more. A mug is a big cup. Let's see what this argument is about. And what in hell's name is a pint? Said the barman. Oh, okay. Well, you know, in the English-speaking world, we have our own measurements, like miles and feet and things like that. So a pint, that's like, you know, in the metric system, I don't know what it is, a liter or something like that. So the old man is using the old measurements. He's asking for a pint, which is what you do when you go into a bar in the UK or Ireland or somewhere like that. You ask for a pint. Even now, they use the metric system. In the US, we still use those measurements, but and they do also in the UK, but not as much. So that's very normal. You walk into a pub and you say, give me a pint, but the barman is saying, pint? What's a pint? I don't know what a pint is, because it's an old man. He's using the old measuring system. So let's see. So what in the hell's name's a pint? said the barman, leaning forward with the tips of his fingers on the counter. Arcadim calls itself a barman. Don't know what a pint is. I think that word arc means hark, which means like listen. That's a very old word, which means like listen. So Arcadim means listen to him. Calls himself a barman and don't know what a pint is. So he thinks he's a bartender, a barman, and he doesn't know what a pint is. Why, a pint's the half of a quart. So these are all the old measuring systems. Not in the US. We still use those measuring systems. But even here in this book, in the 40s, I think this was written in the 1940s. And there's 4 quarts to the gallon. Let's see. I have to teach you the ABC next. So the old man is telling him what a pint is. And he's going through the whole list of measurements. And he's saying, next, do I have to teach you to read? Never heard of 'em. Never heard of 'em, said the barman shortly. Liter, half liter, that's all we serve. There's glasses on the shelf in front of you. So he's telling him the new system. Look, you can order a liter, you can order a half liter. That's all we make here. I don't know what a pint is. And you can look at the glasses to see, do you want big or small? Okay, let's see. And the old man says, I likes a pint, persisted the old man. You could have drawed me off a pint easy enough. We didn't have these bleeding liters when I was a young man. I feel like the old man. When you were a young man, you were all living in the treetops, said the barman with a glance at the other customers. There was a shout of laughter, and the uneasiness caused by Winston's entry seemed to disappear. The old man's white stubbled face had flushed pink. He turned away, muttering to himself, and bumped into Winston. Winston caught him gently by the arm. Nishi says they hated the letter H, I guess. But even now, if you go to London or some parts of England, you will see a lot of people. It's just a particular type of accent. They don't pronounce H's, maybe at all, in certain accents. It isn't common and it doesn't sound nice, so I would not encourage you to imitate that type of English. But it exists, and it still does exist even now. Especially, I think, in places like London. Hadi says, binge and purge. Yet we were talking about the word purge earlier, which means to eliminate something. And binging, actually, Hadi, yesterday, weren't we talking about that word binge? I thought we were, because you were in that class yesterday. Do you remember what binge is? Binge is like, especially you use binge when you're talking about an addiction. So if you are addicted to alcohol, maybe you say, okay, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol, and you stop for 1 month, 2 months, but in your head you're always thinking about it. And one day you say, oh, forget it, I'm going to drink. And then you spend like 3 or 4 days drinking constantly. That's a drinking binge. Or if you go on a diet and you say, no more sugar, I'm not going to eat sugar. Sugar is a drug, trust me. And you say, no more sugar, and you don't do it, but you're always thinking in your head, cake, ice cream. And suddenly, after 2 or 3 months, you say, oh, forget it, and you eat a lot of sugar. That's a binge. You can be addicted to food, and you can eat too much food. Then when you try to stop, maybe you go for a period of 1 month or 2 months, and you do very well. And one day you give up, and for maybe a week, you binge. And binging and purging is a type of eating disorder where you eat a lot of food, and then you you throw up, you vomit to eliminate the food. So the binge part is eating too much, being very excessive with the food. And the purge part is when you eliminate it. That's called bulimia. Yeah. Hadi says, is it bulimia? Yes. Binging and purging and bulimia are the same thing, as far as I know. Okay, let's see. So he turned away, muttering to himself, and bumped into Winston. Winston caught him gently by the arm. May I offer you a drink? He said. You're a gent, said the other, straightening his shoulders again. He appeared not to notice Winston's blue overalls. Pint, he added aggressively to the barman. Pint of wallop. The barman swished two 2.5 liters of dark brown beer into thick glasses, which he had rinsed in a bucket under the counter. Beer was the only drink you could get in the prole pubs. The proles were supposed to not drink, but were supposed not to drink gin, though in practice they could get hold of it easily enough. The game of darts was in full swing. Oh, I think I'm going to put that phrase in here, to be in full swing. That's kind of like to be in the middle of it. Usually when you're talking about a game or an activity, when the activity is in full swing, it means like you're really in the middle of it, like the most exciting part or something like that. That's kind of an interesting word. Why did I say that that was a number 1? I think that's like word number 8. Let's say 9. I lost count of the words. Hadi says binge watching. Yes, binge watching. We talked about binge watching yesterday, and that's like a new phenomenon that happened with things, applications like Netflix, where you could watch an entire season of a TV series in one weekend. That's binge watching. It's like excessive watching of something. Full throttle. Okay, well, to be in full swing means to be in the middle of it, to be like at the climax or the exciting part. Full throttle means like maximum. So it's a little bit different. They both have the word full, but full throttle kind of means like maximum. Nishi says, maybe I'll binge watch all your videos later. I hope you do, Nishi. You spent a lot of time making all these videos. Nobody ever watches them. Okay, let's see. So the proles were supposed not to drink gin, though in practice they could get hold of it easily enough. The game of darts was in full swing again. That means it was right in the middle, like in the exciting part. Everybody was into it. And the knot of men at the bar had begun talking about lottery tickets. Wait, I just suddenly lost my spot. Winston's presence was forgotten for a moment, and there was a deal table under the window where he and the old man could talk without fear of being overheard. It was horribly dangerous, but at any rate, there was no telescreen in the room, a point he had made sure of as soon as he came in. Oh, here we go. We've got this interesting let's see. He could have drawed me up. He could have drawed me off a pint, grumbled the old man as he settled down behind the glass. So the old man is still angry about this pint conversation. He's saying he could have made a pint for me if he wanted to. And grumbling is kind of a resentful talking. Man, he could have done it. That's grumbling. Why didn't he do it? That's grumbling. A half liter ain't enough. Don't satisfy. An old leader's too much. An old leader's too much. It starts my bladder running, let alone the price. So he's saying a half liter isn't enough to drink, but a liter is too much. It says, when it says it starts my bladder running, it means it makes him have to go pee. And plus, it's more expensive. You must have seen great changes since you were a young man, said Winston tentatively. The old man's pale blue eyes moved from the dartboard to the bar, and from the bar to the door of the gents, as though it were in the bar room that he expected the changes to have occurred. The beer was better, he said finally, and cheaper. When I was a young man, my old bear, wallop, we used to call it. By the way, wallop is another word for hit. So I think I've never heard alcohol being referred to as wallop, but what I imagine is that it was strong, because wallop means like hit. And so if you drink it, it hits you. It hits your head. That's what I imagine it means. I've never heard it before. So, wallop, we used to call it, was 4 pence a pint. That was before the war, of course. Which war was that? Said Winston. It's all wars, said the old man vaguely. He took up his glass and his shoulders straightened again. Here's wishing you the very best of health. So here's wishing you the very best of health. Hadi says it would be hard for you to absorb all of the information in the videos. I guess he's talking to Nishi, but I guess not, because you've got that word absorb and you're using it, so congratulations. In his lean throat, the sharp-pointed Adam's apple made a surprisingly rapid up and down movement, and the beer vanished. Winston went... So he just drank that. He drank that pint, or that whatever it was, liter, half liter, very quickly. Winston went to the bar and came back with 2 more half-liters. The old man appeared to have forgotten his prejudice against drinking a full liter. Hassan is asking, is tentatively like gingerly? No. Tentative means like, I think you could think of tentative like for starters, maybe like temporary for starters. Let's see. Tentatively. How do they define it? Means like how you go about a delicate or dangerous situation. Yeah, but let's see. Let's just do tentative to start with. Tentative. Unsure, uncertain, not definite or positive. Well, let's do gingerly. Gingerly is not a very common thing. Tentative is, but the way I would use tentative would be like for starting. Like, but I'll explain why I'm saying that in a minute. I guess they are the same. Being very careful. Yeah, I guess they are the same. Gingerly is not a very common word. It's not something that you see very much or use very much. Tentative, I would think, is more common. And when you say that something is tentative, you say, oh, this could change. This is just for the start. And maybe the reason that you say that is because, let me go back to the definition of tentative means unsure, uncertain, not definite or positive. So when you start something for the very first time, you might say this is tentative, meaning it will probably change because you're not sure how something is going to, what the result is going to be. That's why I say it's like for starters. Yeah, Nishi Verma says things that could be changed later. And I agree with that because you can say like a tentative plan means, okay, this is what I think the plan is now, but probably it will change. I'm not sure how what the outcome will be. That's why I say good way to remember tentative means like for starters, meaning this will probably change later. And that I think that's how they're using it here because uh, where did they use that word tentatively? You must have seen great changes in your life when you were a young man, said Winston tentatively. So this is like the first time Winston is trying to get information from him. And he's not sure how the old man will react. So maybe this will open up into an interesting conversation, or maybe he'll freak out. So that's why I say for starters, because we don't know where this is going. We don't know where the end will be. Okay, let's see. You're very much older than I am, said Winston. You must have grown a man before I was born. You can remember what it was like in the old days, before the revolution. People of my age don't really know anything about those times. We can only read about them in books, and what it says in the books may not be true. I should like your opinion on that. The history books say that life before the revolution was completely different from what it is now. There was the most terrible oppression, injustice, poverty. Worse than anything we can imagine. Here in London, the great mass of people never had enough to eat from birth to death. Half of them don't even half of them hadn't even boots on their feet. They worked 12 hours a day. They left school at 9. They slept 10 in a room. And in the same time, there were very few people, only a few thousands, the capitalists, they were called, and they were rich and powerful. They owned everything that there was to own. They lived in great gorgeous houses with 30 servants. They rode about in motor cars and 4-horse carriages. They drank champagne. They wore top hats. The old man brightened suddenly. So the old man was he liked this talk. He brightened. Suddenly he looked happier. Top hats, he said. Funny you should mention 'em. The same thing come into my head only yesterday. I don't know why. I was just thinking. I ain't seen a top hat in years. Gorn right out. Okay, in some types of English, people put the letter R, the sound R, into words where you normally wouldn't see it. So he's saying gone out, but the way it's written here is gorn out. Gorn right out, because this type of person puts R's in weird places. Gorn right out they have. The last time I wore one was at my sister-in-law's funeral, and that was, well, I couldn't give you the date, but it must have been 50 years ago. Of course, it was only ironed for the occasion, you understand. So a top hat, that's like the very tall hat that people used to wear. And he's saying it was only hired. He doesn't own a top hat. That's usually something very wealthy people use. But he wore a top hat when? At his sister-in-law's funeral. But he rented it. He didn't own it. He said it was hired. It isn't very important about the top hats, said Winston patiently. The point is these capitalists, they and a few lawyers and priests and so forth who lived on them, were the lords of the earth. Everything existed for their benefit. You, the ordinary people, those are the proles, the workers, were their slaves. They could do what they liked with you. They could ship you off to Canada like cattle. So that's like a punishment to go to Canada. They could sleep with your daughters if they chose. They could order you to be flogged. Flogged means like beaten. They could order you to be beaten. Let's see. Hadi says it means warily or cautiously. Hadi uses words I've rarely. Yes, Hadi has a very nice vocabulary, actually. He's got a very advanced vocabulary, it seems. Gingerly. You, the ordinary people, the workers, were their slaves. They could do what they liked with you. They could ship you off to Canada like cattle. They could sleep with your daughters if they chose. They could order you to be flogged with something called a cat o' nine tails. That's like a whip. And you had to take your cap off when you passed them. Every capitalist went on about with a gang of lackeys who. The old man brightened again. Lackeys, he said. Now there's a word I ain't heard since ever so long ago. A lackey is, I think people now, people still use the word lackey. Maybe a lackey would be a person who, let's imagine this in an office situation. You have the boss, and then you have people who always like to be around the boss and who always like to do what the boss tells them to do. They love attention from the boss. They like to. They feel like. Well, they would do anything. They're very devoted to the boss, just because that's their personality. That's the kind of person they are. That's kind of what a lackey is. A lackey is kind of like a slave, but they enjoy it. So let's see how they use lackeys here. Lackeys, he said. Now there's a word I ain't heard since ever so long. Lackeys. That regular takes me back, that does. I recollect, donkeys years ago, I used to sometimes go to Hyde Park, on Sunday afternoon to hear the blokes making speeches. Salvation Army, Roman Catholics, Jews, Indians, all sorts there was. And there was one bloke, well, I couldn't give you his name, but a real powerful speaker he was. He didn't half give it 'em, lackeys. Lackeys, he says, lackeys of the bourgeoisie. So we were talking about bourgeoisie earlier, right? Do you remember that? And remember, those are kind of like middle-class people. It's kind of an insult to call someone bougie or bourgeois because it means they're kind of average, rich, with no real feeling, I guess. And they enjoy adulation. Hadi is really showing off his vocabulary today. Adulation. Yeah, they enjoy. They can't be the boss, so the next best thing is to be to get very positive attention from the boss. So they will do anything to make the boss happy, to get praise from the boss. So, there's a famous place in London where you go. I guess it's in Hyde Park, according to this. I don't remember the name of the corner, but you go there and you can say whatever you want. So, although nowadays I don't think that you can do that anymore, but it used to be you could stand on this street corner in London and say whatever you want, and you could never get in trouble for it because that's just the tradition. And I think they're referring to this particular place. I don't remember the name of it. So that's why he's mentioning all these different people giving speeches. Salvation Army, Roman Catholics, Jews, Indians, all sorts there was. And there was one bloke, one guy, Hadi says, they're like being a hanger-on. You could use that. You could say they were a hanger-on. And so there was one guy on that corner where all these people stand and just tell their ideas or their philosophy. And the man says, I couldn't give you his name. I can't remember his name, but a real powerful speaker he was. So he was a really good speaker. He didn't half give it him lackeys. I don't really understand that. He didn't half give it to him. I think that means he really, really spoke his mind. He really said what he was thinking, but I'm not sure. Lackeys of the bourgeoisie. So this man used to stand on a street corner and talk about the lackeys of the bourgeoisie. The yes, uh, Hadi says Hyde Park. Yeah, he mentions Hyde Park. So, are you familiar with that street corner where everybody says whatever they want? Have you heard about that place? I don't know where it is. I think it has a special name. Now I'm going to look. Because I thought it was something corner. Speaker's Corner. It's called Speaker's Corner, and it is on the northeast edge of Hyde Park. Yeah, so that is the place he's talking about, and it is in Hyde Park. Okay, so the old man is remembering this one really great speaker there, who used to. I guess people would walk by and he would say, "You're all lackeys of the bourgeoisie." Let's see. Flunkies. That's another word. That's a funny word. Flunkies. That's again. That's a word like the modern term. People use like ass kisser or brown noser, or they'll say yes to anything just to get positive attention from someone in power. Uh, and flunky. That's a funny word. Same thing as a lackey. Let's see. Flunkies of the ruling class. So people will walk by and this man would say, "You're all lackeys and flunkies of the ruling class, the bourgeoisie." Parasites. That was another of them. And hyenas. That's hyenas. That's an animal. Definitely called them hyenas. Of course he was referring to the Labor Party, you understand. Winston had the feeling that they were talking at cross purposes. So, Winston is trying to get an idea of what it was like before the revolution. But this man, he's just remembering things and having a wonderful time remembering just things like the top hat and this man on the corner. That's not what Winston wants. That's not the information he's looking for. "What I really wanted to know was this," he said. "Do you feel that you have more freedom now than you had in those days? Are you treated more like a human being in the old days? The rich people, the people at the top." "The House of Lords," put in the old man reminiscently. "The House of Lords, if you like. What I'm asking is, were these people able to treat you as an inferior simply because they were rich and you were poor? Is it a fact, for instance, that you had to call them sir and take off your cap when you passed them?" See, Hadi, you're using words, I don't even know what that is. Factotum? I have to look that up. Maybe you could teach me English. Factotum. I've never heard that before. Factotum. It's definitely not a common word, whatever it is. An employee who does all kinds of work. No, I don't think so. I mean, this is not a word that I encourage you to use because I don't think I've never heard anybody say that word before. I had to find the meaning of it. That just means, according to the definition, that just means someone who does many different things. But I think a lackey or a flunky is someone who always says yes, who's always very happy to say yes, who wants to make the boss happy, who doesn't like it if the boss is angry. They only like, they'll do anything to make the boss happy. The old man appeared to think deeply. He drank off about a quarter of his beer before answering. "Yes," he said. "They liked you to touch your cap to them." So Winston is saying, is it true you had to remove your cap and say hello? And the old man says, yes, they liked you to touch your cap, meaning like this. Not take it off, but do this. It showed respect. It showed respect like. I didn't agree with it myself, but I done it often enough. Had to, as you might say. And was it usual? I'm only quoting what I've read in history books. Was it usual for these people and their servants to push you off the pavement into the gutter? One of them pushed me once, said the old man. I recollect it as if it was yesterday. It was boat race night. Terribly rowdy. Rowdy means very chaotic. A lot of noise, a lot of activity. They used to get on boat. They used to get on boat race night, and I bumps into a young bloke on Shaftesbury Avenue. Quite a gent he was. Dress shirt, top hat, black overcoat. He was kind of zigzagging. Zigzagging is like this, not walking straight, but walking like this. He was kind of zigzagging across the pavement, and I bumps into him, accidental-like. He says, "Why can't you look where you're going?" He says, "Why can't you look where you're going?" He says. I say, "Do you think you've bought the bleeding pavement?" So this Jew think, I don't know if you've noticed this, but when you put the question word "do" with a word like "you," when people are saying that conversationally, it sounds like this: did you? Did you? So when you say "did" plus "you," the sound changes. It combines and makes "Jew." Did you? But if you're speaking in a very short way, like this old man, he doesn't say "did you," he just says "Jew." That's not, you don't have to worry about that. That's not very typical, but it's understandable. It's very understandable. Do you think you bought the pavement? So do you think you own the pavement? Do you think that the pavement, the sidewalk, is your property? He says, "I'll twist your bloody head off if you get fresh with me." I says, "You're drunk. I'll give you in charge of half a minute." I says, and if you'll believe me, he puts his this is hard to read. He puts his hand on my chest. He puts his hand on my chest and gives me a shove. As pretty near sent me under the wheels of a bus. So the man is drunk and he's zigzagging down the pavement, and the old man didn't see him. He bumped into him, and the drunk man says, "Why don't you watch where you're going?" And the old man says, "What? You own the pavement?" And the other man threatens him. He says, "I'll beat you." And the old man says, "You're drunk." And so the other man pushed him, and a bus almost ran over him in the street. I don't know if you got that from the dialogue, but that's what he said. "Well, I was young in them days, and I was going to have fetched him one only." So he was saying, I was young then, and I was going to beat him. I was going to hit him. But, and then let's see what happens. A sense of helplessness took hold of Winston. The old man's memory was nothing but a rubbish heap of details. One could question him all day without getting any real information. The party histories might still be true, after a fashion. They might even be completely true. He made a last attempt. "Perhaps I've not made myself clear," he said. "What I'm trying to say is this. You've been alive very long." Okay, Nishi Verma is saying goodbye. Thank you for watching. I hope that you continue watching, and I've got hundreds of videos, hundreds of classes for you to watch, and I hope that you come back. Okay, so perhaps I've not made myself clear, he said. What I'm trying to say is this. You've been alive a very long time. You've lived half your life before the revolution. In 1925, for instance, you were already grown up. Would you say, from what you can remember, that life in 1925 was better than it is now, or worse? If you could choose, would you prefer to live then or now? And the old man looked meditatively. The old man looked meditating, like, he's thinking about it. Meditatively. The old man looked meditatively at the darts board. He finished up his beer more slowly than before, and when he spoke, it was with a tolerant, philosophical air, as though the beer had mellowed him. Mellow means like make softer. So if something becomes mellow, at first it was very hard, and now it's like softer. So the beer, because remember in the beginning he was arguing with the bartender and he was very unhappy, and now he was sitting and he had 2 beers and he was talking to Winston, and he had become more mellow. He wasn't so angry or wanting to argue. So the beer mellowed him. Where was that? I lost it. I know what you expect me to say, he said. You expect me to say I'd sooner be young again. Most people would say they'd sooner be young again. If you asked them. So remember, there are some types of English where an R is pronounced in very strange places. So this is if you asked them, but the way he's saying it is if you asked them. You got your health and your strength, and when you're young, when you get to my time of life, you ain't never well. I suffer something wicked from my feet, and my bladder's just terrible. 6 and 7 times a night, it has me out of bed. So your bladder, that's part of the body that makes you pee. So his bladder bothers him. So 6 or 7 times a night, he gets up and has to go to the bathroom. He has to go pee. That sounds like me. That's too much information. Let's see. I suffer something wicked from my feet, and my bladder is just terrible. 6 or 7 times a night, it has me out of bed. On the other hand, there's great advantages to being an old man. You ain't got the same worries. No truck with women. I don't know what that means, no truck with women. And that's a great thing. I ain't 'ad a woman for near on 30 years. If you'd credit it. Nor wanted to, what's more. Winston sat back against the windowsill. It was no use going on. He was about to buy some more beer when the old man suddenly got up and shuffled rapidly into the stinking urinal at the side of the room. Oh, they didn't even have a bathroom, so there was just a place to go to the bathroom in the corner. Oh, that's disgusting. Let's see. The extra half-liter was already working on him. Winston sat for a minute or two, gazing at the empty glass. It's like looking, so he's just looking at the empty glass. And hardly noticed when his feet carried him out into the street. Within 20 years at the most, he reflected, the huge and simple question, was life better before the revolution than it is now? Would have ceased once and for all to be answerable. But in effect, it was unanswerable even now, since the few scattered survivors of the ancient world were incapable of comparing one age with another. They remembered a million useless things, a quarrel with a workmate. A quarrel is another type of fight. A hunt for a lost bicycle pump. The expression on a long dead sister's face. The swirls of dust on a windy morning 70 years ago. But all the relevant facts were outside the range of their vision. They were like the ant, which can see small objects, but not large ones. And when memory failed, the written records were falsified. When that happened, the claim of the party to have improved the conditions of human life had got to be accepted because there did not exist, and never again could exist, any standard against which it could be tested. So, any old people that you ask about before the revolution, they can remember things, but they seem not to be able to remember the quality of it. They can remember incidents, things that happened, but they can't tell you about the quality of that experience. And so it's very easy for the party to rewrite history now that most of these people are either dead or dying, and they can write and say whatever they want about the past. Well, that sounds like now. Any standard against which it could be tested. At this moment, his train of thought stopped abruptly. He halted and looked up. He was in a narrow street with few dark little shops interspersed among dwelling houses. Immediately above his head there hung 3 discolored metal balls, which looked as if they had been once gilded. Gilded, that comes from the word gold. And when something is gilded, that means it's covered in gold. It doesn't mean like completely covered in gold, but maybe like a very small gold covered it. That's what gilded means. It's like golded. So he saw these balls hanging up, and they had a strange color. It looked like at one point they had a gold coloring around them, but that had disappeared. Of course, he was standing outside the junk shop where he had bought the diary. A twinge of fear went through him. It had been a sufficiently rash act to buy the book in the beginning, and he had sworn never to come near that place again. And yet, the instant that he allowed his thoughts to wander, his feet had brought him back to of their own accord. So, when he went to buy the journal at this junk store a long time ago, he said to himself, "I'll never go there again. It's so risky." And yet, at this point, he wasn't thinking. His feet just took him to the store, because suddenly he was standing in front of the store and didn't even remember walking there. It was precisely against suicidal impulses of this kind that he had hoped to guard himself by opening a diary. At the same time, he noticed that although it was nearly 21 hours, the shop was still open, with the feeling that he could be less conspicuous inside than hanging out. Conspicuous means noticeable, like people can see you. So he was saying, "I will be less conspicuous if I go inside." Meaning, if I go inside, people won't see that I'm standing in front of the store. I won't get in trouble. It's riskier to be outside than inside. He stepped through the doorway. If questioned, he could plausibly say that he was trying to buy razor blades. The proprietor had just lighted a hanging oil lamp, which gave off an unclean but friendly smell. He was the man of perhaps 60, frail and bowed, with long, benevolent nose and mild eyes distorted by thick spectacles. His hair was almost white, but his eyebrows were bushy and still black. His spectacles, his gentle, fussy movements, and the fact that he was wearing an aged jacket of black velvet gave him a vague air of intellectuality, as though he had been some kind of literary man, or perhaps a musician. His voice was soft, as though faded, and his accent less debased than the majority of proles. So it's funny that he's talking about the accent. Winston is noticing from the way that he's dressed and the way that he looks, like he must be a very intelligent person. He looks kind of unusual, not like the typical prole. And then when he speaks, remember we were kind of like imitating or talking about this kind of street accent earlier. This man doesn't have it. He talks normally. I recognized you on the pavement, he said immediately. You're the gentleman that bought the young lady's keepsake album. That was a beautiful bit of paper, that was. Cream laid, it used to be called. There's been no paper like that made for, oh, I dare say 50 years. He peered at Winston over the top of his spectacles. Is there anything special I can do for you? Or do you just want to look around? I was passing, said Winston vaguely. I just looked in. I don't want anything in particular. It's just as well, said the other, because I don't suppose I could have satisfied you. He made an apologetic gesture with his hand. You see how it is, an empty shop, you might say. Between you and me, the antique trade's just about finished. No demand anymore. Nobody wants antiques anymore. Nobody wants old things anymore. And no stock either. Furniture, china. China is a term that we use to talk about dishes for eating. So dishes, bowls, servingware, especially if it's very nice, it's called china. It's all been broken up by degrees. And of course, the metal stuff's mostly been melted down. Haven't seen a brass candlestick in years. The tiny interior of the shop was in fact uncomfortably full, but there was almost nothing in it of the slightest value. The floor space was very restricted, because all round the walls were stacked innumerable dusty picture frames. In the window, there were trays of nuts and bolts, worn-out chisels, penknives with broken blades, tarnished watches that did not even pretend to be in going order, and other miscellaneous rubbish. Only a small table in the corner was there a litter of odds and ends. Odds and ends means like various different things. So there wasn't very much in the shop, but there was one corner with odds and ends. That could be anything. Books, clothes, little statues, little vases, plates, odds and ends, different various things. Actually, that's kind of an interesting word. I'm going to put that on my list of videos to make later. Odds and ends. I just put this up here to remind me that I have to make something about it later. Okay. Only on a small table in the corner was there a litter of odds and ends, lacquered snuff boxes, agate brooches, and the like, which looked as though they might include something interesting. As Winston wandered towards the table, his eyes were caught by a round, smooth thing that gleamed softly in the lamplight. So gleaming, that's like giving light or reflecting light. So it was something shiny, giving off some light, reflecting some light. And he picked it up. It was a heavy lump of glass, curved on one side, flat on the other, making almost a hemisphere. Hemisphere means half of a circle. There was or half of a globe. So like a bowl, kind of the shape of a bowl. There was a peculiar softness, as of rainwater, in both the color and the texture of the glass. At the heart of it, magnified by a curved surface, there was a strange, pink, convoluted object that recalled a rose or a sea anemone. "What is it?" said Winston, fascinated. "That's coral, that is," said the old man. "It must have come from the Indian Ocean. They used to kind of embed it in glass. That wasn't made less than 100 years ago. More, by the look of it." "It's a beautiful thing," said Winston. "It is a beautiful thing," said the other appreciatively. Now there's not many that'd say so nowadays. He coughed. Now, if it so happened that you wanted to buy it, that'd cost you $4. I can remember when a thing like that would have fetched £8. And £8 was, well, I can't work it out, but it was a lot of money. But who cares about genuine antiques nowadays? Even the few that's left. Winston immediately paid over the $4 and slid the coveted thing into his pocket. What appealed to him about it was not so much its beauty as the air it seemed to possess of belonging to an age quite different from the present one. The soft, rain-watery glass was not like any glass that he had ever seen. The thing was doubly attractive because of its apparent uselessness, though he could guess that it must have been intended as a paperweight. It was very heavy in his pocket, but fortunately it did not make much of a bulge. It was a queer little thing. That word queer means strange. It was a strange little thing. Even a compromising thing for a party member to have it in his possession. Anything old, and for that matter anything beautiful, was always vaguely suspect. So if you owned something old, or if you owned something beautiful, that would make party members suspicious. What are you doing with that? Why do you have that? You shouldn't have that. The old man had grown noticeably more cheerful after receiving the $4. Winston realized that he would have accepted 3 or even 2. There's another room upstairs. There's not much in it, just a few pieces. We'll do with a light if we're going upstairs. He lit another lamp, and with his bowed back, led the way slowly up the steep and worn stairs along a tiny passage into a room which did not give on the street but looked out on a cobbled yard and a forest of chimney pots. Winston noticed that the furniture was still arranged as though the room was meant to be lived in. There was a strip of carpet on the floor, a picture or two on the walls, and a deep, slanternly armed chair drawn up to the fireplace. An old-fashioned glass clock with a 12-hour face was ticking away on the mantelpiece. Under the window and occupying nearly a quarter of the room was an enormous bed with a mattress still on it. "We lived here till my wife died," said the old man, half apologetically. "I'm selling the furniture off by little and little. Now that's a beautiful mahogany bed, or at least it would be if you could get the bugs out of it. But I dare say you'd find a little bit cumbersome. Cumbersome means like inconvenient, like it's too big or difficult. So, like imagine think about that. He bought a little piece of coral and he is worried that people will see him taking it home. But imagine if you bought a big wooden bed, and you tried to bring that home. That would get a lot of attention, and it would be very difficult to carry home. I think that's what he means by cumbersome. He was holding the light high up so as to illuminate the whole room, and in the warm, dim light, the place looked curiously inviting. The thought flitted through Winston's mind that it would probably be quite easy to rent the room for a few dollars a week. If he dared to take the risk, it was a wild, impossible notion, to be abandoned as soon as thought of. But the room had awakened in him a sort of nostalgia, a sort of ancestral memory. It seemed to him that he knew exactly what it felt like to sit in a room like this, in an armchair beside an open fire, with your feet in the fender and a kettle on the hob, utterly alone, utterly secure, with nobody watching you, no voice pursuing you, No sound except the singing of the kettle and the friendly ticking of the clock. There's no telescreen. He could not help murmuring. Ah, said the old man. I never had one of those things. Too expensive, and I never seemed to feel the need of it, somehow. Now that's a nice gate leg table on the corner there. Though of course you'd have to put new hinges on it if you wanted to use the flaps. A flap is a thing that moves like this. So can you imagine a table that you could make bigger because you push up the flap? Those are flaps on the side. Have you seen a table like that? Let's see. Now I'm going to put flapped table just to show you. You probably know though. So this is a table with flaps. A flap is something that hangs like this. This is a flap. And so those are flaps on the table to make the table bigger. There was a small bookcase on the corner, and Winston... Wait a minute, I lost my place. There was a small bookcase on the corner, and Winston had already gravitated towards it. It contained nothing but rubbish. The hunting down and destruction of books had been done with the same thoroughness, that means completely, like 100%, in the prole quarters as everywhere else. It was very unlikely that these existed anywhere in Oceania. A copy of a book printed earlier than 1960. The old man, still carrying a lamp, was standing in front of a picture in a rosewood frame which hung on the other side of the fireplace opposite the bed. Now, if you happen to be interested in old prints at all, he began delicately. Winston came across to examine the picture. It was a steel engraving of an oval building with a rectangular window and a small tower in front. There was a railing running round the building. And at the rear, there was what appeared to be a statue. Winston gazed at it for some moments. It seemed vaguely familiar, though he did not remember the statue. The frame's fixed to the wall, said the old man, but I could unscrew it for you, I dare say. I know that building, said Winston finally. It's a ruin now. It's in the middle of the street, outside the Palace of Justice. That's right. Outside the law courts. It was bombed in, many years ago. It was a church at some time. St. Clement Danes, its name was. He smiled apologetically, as though conscious of saying something slightly ridiculous, and added, Oranges and lemons, says the bells of St. Clemens. What's that? Said Winston. Oh, oranges and lemons, says the bells of St. Clemens. That was a rhyme we had when I was a little boy. How it goes on, I don't remember, but I do know it ended up. Here comes a candle to light you to bed. Here comes a chopper to chop off your head. It was a kind of a dance. They held out their arms for you to pass under. And when they came to, here comes the chopper to chop off your head. Oh, that's like playing the game London Bridges. And when they, it was a kind of a dance. They held under your arms, pass you under, and here comes the chopper. They would. So that's like, there's a game called London Bridges. You sing a song, London Bridges falling down. And the two kids hold up their arms like this. They're holding hands. And the children go under. But at the end of the song, my fair lady, then they bring their arms down. So I think this is exactly the same game. But instead of nice I don't know if that's actually a nice game, actually, because I think I don't know. I have to look into that. But here they say, "Here comes the chopper to chop off your head." So that's the loser kid who gets caught at the end of the song. Well, it was a kind of dance. They held out their arms for you to pass under. And when they came, "Here comes the chopper to chop off your head," they brought their arms down and caught you. It was just names of churches. All the London churches were in it. All the principal ones, that is. Winston wondered vaguely what century the church belonged. It was always difficult to determine the age of a London building. Anything large and impressive, if it was reasonably new in appearance, was automatically claimed to have been built since the Revolution, while anything that was obviously earlier dated was ascribed to some dim period called the Middle Ages, the century of capitalism, were held to have produced nothing of any value. One could not learn history from architecture any more than one could learn it from books. Statues, inscriptions, memorial stones, the names of streets, anything that might throw light upon the past, had been systematically altered. "I never knew it had been a church," he said. "There's a lot of them left, really," said the old man, "though they've been put to other uses." Now, how did that rhyme go? Ah, I've got it. "Oranges and lemons," says the bells of St. Clement's. "You owe me 3 farthings," says the bells of St. Martin's. So wait, you have to make that rhyme. "You owe me 3 farthings," says the bells of St. Martin's. And now, well, that's as far as I can get. A farthing, that was a small copper coin. Looked something like a cent. "Where was St. Martin's?" said Winston. "St. Martin's? That's still standing. It's in Victory Square alongside the picture gallery, a building with a kind of triangle porch and pillars in front of it, and big flights of steps." Winston knew the place well. It was a museum used for propaganda displays of various kinds, scale models of rocket bombs and floating fortresses, waxworks, a waxwork tableau illustrating enemy atrocities and the like. A tableau is like a scene, let's just say. So it's like a picture, but I think it should be in 3 dimensions. Wait, let's look at a picture of a tableau. Oh no, it's the name of some kind of software. So if you type in Tableau, you just get screenshots of the software. So here's an example of a tableau. And not that it's an important word. You probably will never use it. So people dress in costumes and they try to pose like a picture of a famous scene or something famous that happened. That's a tableau. "St. Martin's in the Fields, it used to be called," supplemented the old man, "though I don't recollect any fields anywhere in those parts." Winston did not buy the picture. It would have been an even more incongruous possession than the glass paperweight, and impossible to carry home, unless it were taken out of its frame. But he lingered for some minutes more, talking to the old man, whose name he discovered was not Weeks, as one might have gathered from the inscription on the shop front, but Charrington. Mr. Charrington, it seemed, was a widower, aged 63, and had inhabited this shop for 30 years. Throughout the time, he had been intending to alter the name over the window, but had never quite got to the point of doing it. All the while that they were talking, The half-remembered rhyme kept running through Winston's heads. Oranges and lemons, says the bells of St. Clemens. You owe me 3 farthings, says the bells of St. Martin's. It was curious, but when you said it to yourself, it had the illusion of actually hearing the bells of the lost London that still existed somewhere or other, disguised and forgotten from one ghostly steeple. Steeple is the high part, the pointy part of a church. After another, he seemed to hear them pealing forth. Yet, so far as he could remember, he had never in real life heard church bells ringing. I remember church bells when I was little, but I don't remember hearing too many church bells now that I'm an adult. That's a shame because I think they sound nice. He got away from Mr. Charrington and went down the stairs alone, so as not to let the old man see him reconnoitering the street before stepping out. So reconnoiter, that's like a military term. I think that means like doing this. Not a terribly useful term, I think. Oh, let's see. He had already made up his mind that after a suitable interval, a month, say, he would take the risk of visiting the shop again. It was perhaps not more dangerous than shirking an evening at the center. To shirk something means to dismiss it, to not care about it, or to... So, like shirking the center means he's supposed to go to the center, but he doesn't go to the center. He doesn't care about the center. Shirking it. You use that word with responsibility a lot. Shirking your responsibilities. That means like ignoring your responsibilities. The serious piece of folly had been to come back here in the first place after buying the diary, and without knowing whether the proprietor of the shop could be trusted. However, yes, he thought again. He would come back. He would buy further scraps of beautiful rubbish. He would buy the engraving of St. Clement's Danes, take it out of its frame, and carry it home concealed under his jacket of his overalls. He would drag the rest of the poem out of Mr. Charrington's memory. Even the lunatic project of renting the room upstairs flashed momentarily through his mind again. For perhaps 5 seconds, exaltation made him careless, and he stepped out on the pavement without so much as a preliminary glance through the window. He had even started humming an improvised tune. He was humming. Like, so the oranges, that became his song. He was humming. The oranges and lemons, says the bells of St. Clemens. You owe me 3 farthings, says the... Suddenly, his heart seemed to turn to ice, and his bowels to water. A figure in blue overalls was coming down the pavement, not 10 meters away. It was the girl from the fiction department, the girl with dark hair. The light was failing, but there was no difficulty in recognizing her. She looked him straight in the face, and then walked quickly on, as though she had not seen him. Oh, now remember earlier we were talking about keep on, meaning continue, or go on, meaning continue, and all because I was talking about read on, which means continue reading. And here we have combining the word on with the word walk, meaning continue walking, don't stop. And that's what happened here. Where did that go? She looked straight into his face and then walked quickly on. She walked on. She walked quickly on, as though she had not seen him. For a few seconds, Winston was too paralyzed to move. Then he turned to the right and walked heavily away, not noticing for the moment that he was going in the wrong direction. At any rate, one question was settled. There was no doubting any longer that the girl was spying on him. She must have been following him here. because it was not credible that by pure chance she should have been happened to be walking on the same evening up the same obscure back street, kilometers distant from any quarter where party members lived. It was too great a coincidence. Whether she was really an agent of the thought police or simply an amateur spy actuated by officiousness hardly mattered. It was enough that she was watching him. Probably she had seen him go into the pub as well. It was an effort to walk. The lump of glass in his pocket banged against his thigh at each step. And when he half-minded to take it out and throw it away, the worst thing was the pain in his belly. For a couple of minutes, he had the feeling that he would die. If he could not reach a lavatory soon, he had to go to the bathroom. But there would be no public lavatories in a quarter like this. Then the spasm passed, leaving a dull ache behind. The street was a blind alley. Winston halted, stood for several seconds, wondering vaguely what to do, then turned round and began to retrace his steps. As he turned, it occurred to him the girl had only passed him 3 minutes ago, and that by running he could probably catch up with her. He could keep on her track till they were in the same quiet place, and then smash her skull with the cobblestone. The piece of glass in his pocket would be heavy enough for the job. But he abandoned the idea immediately, because even the thought of making any physical effort was unbearable. He could not run. He could not strike a blow. Besides, she was young and lusty and would defend herself. He thought also of hurrying to the community center and staying there till the place closed, so as to establish a partial alibi for the evening. But that was too impossible. A deadly lassitude had taken hold of him, and he wanted to get. I'm getting tired because I've been reading for 3 hours now. I don't know how much time is left on this. It's got to be finished pretty soon. This is a very long, like 4 more pages. Okay, I'm going to take a break because I just need to take a break. I'll be back in 1 minute. Let me just change my screen to my Be Right Back screen. Okay. Let's keep going. It was 22 hours when he got back to the flat. The lights would be switched off at the main at 23:30. He went into the kitchen and swallowed nearly a teacupful of Victory Gin. Then he went to the table in the alcove, sat down, took the diary out of the drawer. But he did not open it at once, for from the telescreen a brassy female voice was squalling a patriotic song. He sat staring at the marbled cover of the book, trying without success to shut the voice out of his consciousness. It was at night that they came for you, always at night. The proper thing was to kill yourself before they got to you. Undoubtedly, some people did so. Many of the disappearances were actually suicides. But it needed desperate courage to kill yourself in a world where firearms or any quick and certain poison were completely unprocurable. He thought with a kind of astonishment of the biological uselessness of pain and fear, the treachery of the human body which always freezes into inertia at exactly the moment when a special effort is needed. He might have silenced the dark-haired girl if only he had acted quickly enough, but precisely because of the extremity of his danger, he had lost the power to act. It struck him in the moment of the crisis. One is never fighting against an external enemy, but always against one's own body. Even now, in spite of the gin, the dull ache in his belly made consecutive thought impossible. And it is the same, he perceived, in all seemingly heroic or tragic situations, on the battlefield, in the torture chamber, on the sinking ship. The issues that you are fighting for are always forgotten, because the body swells up until it fills the universe, and even when you are not paralyzed by fright or screaming with pain, life is a moment-to-moment struggle against hunger or cold or sleeplessness, against a sour stomach or an aching tooth. He opened the diary. It was important to write something down. The woman on the telescreen had started a new song. Her voice seemed to stick into his brain like jagged splinters of glass. He tried to think of O'Brien, for whom or to whom the diary was written, but instead he began thinking of the things that would happen to him after the thought police took him away. It would not matter. They killed you at once. To be killed was what you expected, but before death, nobody spoke of such things, yet everybody knew of them. There was what happened? There was the routine confession that had to be gone through. The groveling. Groveling means like, oh, please, oh, I'm so sorry. It's like begging, but it's more pathetic than begging. Groveling is worse than begging. Let's see. The groveling on the floor, the screaming for mercy, the cracking of broken bones, the smashed teeth, the bloody clots of hair. Why did you have to endure it, since the end was always the same? Why was it not possible to cut a few days or weeks out of your life? Nobody ever escaped detection, and nobody ever failed to confess. When once you had succumbed to thought crime, it was certain that by a given date you would be dead. Why then Did that horror, which altered nothing, have to lie embedded in future time? So he's saying, why don't they just kill you? Why did they make you go through this confessing and begging and torture? Just, they're going to kill you anyway. Just kill them, kill them immediately. He tried, with a little more success than before, to summon up the image of O'Brien. We shall meet in the place where there is no darkness, O'Brien had said to him. I knew what it meant, or I thought he knew. That he's I think that was a dream he had of O'Brien. O'Brien is a very big party member, and one time they made eye contact, and from that moment, Winston understood that they both thought the same way. And then Winston had a dream about him, and in that dream, O'Brien said, we shall meet in the place where there is no darkness. I think that's what happened, if I remember. He knew what it meant, or he thought he knew. The place where there is no darkness was the imagined future, which one could never see, but which by foreknowledge one could mystically share in. But with the voice from the telescreen nagging at his ears, I'm going to put the word nagging up here. I think that's a good word. Nagging. Whenever I explain nagging, what happened here? Wait a minute. When I came back from my little break, I opened on the wrong screen. Okay. Let me put this. Nagging. I think this is word 10. The way I always like to explain the word nagging, it's like, imagine you go to the grocery store with a little child, maybe, I don't know, 4 years old. And they pick up some candy in the store and they say, can I have this candy? And you say no. What do you think the reaction of the child will be? Will the child say, okay, sorry, and put it back? No, they'll say, give me the candy, I want the candy. And they will not shut up until you get the candy for them, usually. So that's nagging. Nagging is something that never stops. It just keeps going and going and going. It means it's like another word for persistent, but nagging is a much more negative word than persistent. How did they use nagging here? One could mystically share in both the voice from the telescreen nagging at his ears. So the voice on the telescreen, you know, the telescreen always has somebody on there saying, we have to do this, we're going to do this. It's very annoying. Just like that child in the store. Give me the candy, give me the candy. It's just always going, never stopping, and it's very annoying. That's how they're using nagging here. But with the voice from the telescreen nagging at his ears, he could not follow the train of thought further. He put a cigarette in his mouth. Half the tobacco promptly fell out onto his tongue, a bitter dust which was difficult to spit out again. The face of Big Brother swam into his mind, displacing that of O'Brien. Just as he had done a few days earlier, he slid a coin out of his pocket and looked at it. The face gazed up at him, heavy, calm, protecting. But what kind of smile was hidden beneath the dark mustache? Like a leaden knell, the words came back at him. War is peace. Freedom is slavery. Ignorance is strength. Oh, wow. Okay, so we're done with Chapter 8 of 1984 by George Orwell, and also Part 1 of the book. We've completed Part 1, and now we will continue with part 2 next time. Chapter 1, part 2. And so thank you everyone who stayed and watched for the entire time. And I can't wait to start part 2 with you, chapter 1, part 2 next time. Until then, have a good day.